So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our fifth NSF Regional Innovation Engines Roadshow event. We're excited to have everyone here. I want to jump right in and give you just a little bit of a roadmap for today's event. We're going to kick it off with a very brief overview of the program that I'm going to give. And then we're going to have sort of a lightning ecosystem builder panel with a bunch of folks who have expertise in doing this kind of work. And then we're going to spend the bulk of the time in regional breakout rooms where you'll be able to meet some of the other folks in your general area that are interested in the program and hopefully start making connections with each other. Okay. So NSF, for those of you who are not familiar with NSF, we fund predominantly basic and foundational research. We have an $8.5 billion budget. 94% of those dollars go out the door to fund research and education activities. And in any given year, about 200 million also goes to seed public and private partnerships. If you're not familiar with NSF, we are organized around several directorates and offices that tend to be structured generally around different STEM disciplines. In March of this year, we stood up a brand new directorate, the TIP Directorate, Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate, that really crosses all of those original offices and directorates to really support the translation of the foundational work happening in those directorates to practice and have a larger societal impact. The mission of TIP is really to harness the nation's diverse talent pool to advance critical emerging technologies, address pressing societal and economic challenges, and accelerate the translation of research from lab to market. We really want to improve U.S. competitiveness, growing the U.S. economy, and training a diverse workforce. So we're really here to discuss the NSF Engines program. So the goal of the program is to really catalyze and accelerate regional scale R&D-based innovation ecosystems across the U.S. And we envision engines that will be able to advance critical technologies, address societal challenges, and enable job creation and promote overall economic growth in those regions. To do this, we have launched this program that will fund an engine for up to 10 years at up to $160 million. And for regions that may be not quite ready to submit a full engines proposal, we're offering smaller awards that would be for $1 million for up to 2 years to plan for an engine. So what is an NSF engine? We see these as multi-sector coalitions of regional partners that work together to catalyze a regional innovation ecosystem that is both in a topic area of regional relevance and of national and societal significance. Right, so you really want to see both of those things in concert. They would be led, these engines would be led by a CEO, and we would expect to see partners that would cross many sectors, including industry, higher ed, government, nonprofit agencies, community-led organizations. So you can imagine if you have an NSF engine represented here by this gear, it's embedded within its regional innovation engine, its regional innovation ecosystem. And as the engine matures and continues to do its work, that regional innovation ecosystem is going to grow, thrive, and last long beyond the 10 years of NSF funding. So I mentioned that we have these two different types of awards. That Type 1 award really is a developmental award. The Type 2 awards, which are the $160 million awards, are really to take a region that finds itself in sort of a nascent or emergent phase of its maturity and invest in that region and help drive the growth of that region so that by the end of the 10 years, it's entering a mature phase of development. And I would point you to the BAA. We sort of describe this model of ecosystem development and maturity for more detail. So there's a lot of different ways you can structure an engine. And I'm using this slide just to kind of give you a broad overview of how you can approach the idea of an engine. As I mentioned, we want these engines to address societal or economic needs or challenges, right? So you can imagine topics like climate change, access to equitable healthcare, resilient infrastructure, right? A couple of examples. There are obviously many, many more. So you can have an engine that is focused on one of those societal challenges, and to address those challenges, you're trying to grow the emerging technologies to address those problems, right? So artificial intelligence, advanced manufacturing, there's a whole host of emerging technologies that you could use to address these societal challenges. So you're really looking for that right combination of topic areas, challenges, and R&D areas that you want to focus on. So I want to talk just a bit about some of the key characteristics of an NSF engine. We really see these as being, at its heart, robust, having robust partnerships within the region. And through those partnerships, we would expect these engines to be able to focus on the use-inspired R&D that the region has selected, translating that innovation to practice, and then growing a comprehensive workforce to support that growing ecosystem. We imagine engines as, in the long run, being financially sustainable, developing a culture of innovation, focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility really right out of the gate across all aspects of the engine. And sort of with a long-term eye on using this engine to really have community wealth building generated across the region. And I will also point you to the BAA in order to read more about some of the structural aspects and accountability aspects that we have built into this program around leadership, evaluation, things like that. So this program is a little bit different than a lot of other NSF programs in terms of eligibility to submit or receive awards. So if we're just thinking about who could submit a proposal, this would include our academic institutions, for-profit institutions, and nonprofit institutions. In addition to that, organizations that aren't eligible to submit but can receive sub-awards of an engine proposal would include federally funded research and development centers, national labs, and US state, local, and tribal governments, limited to the agencies and offices that are specifically dedicated to innovation, economic, and workforce development. And then, of course, there are a host of other entities that are ineligible, and they are also outlined in the BAA. So engine structure. How do we see all of the various partners coming together to form an engine? We've put together some examples. This is in no way exhaustive, but it's kind of a visual to help you get a sense of what this may look like. At the center here, you've got the engine lead in this diagram. We're highlighting a consortium of colleges that have come together to lead the engine. They're core partners who are going to be, the larger players and sort of the investment and contribution to the engine. Maybe a community college, a nonprofit focused on the workforce, a philanthropic organization, some VCs. And then additional partners may include the local government or state government or a university. You can imagine shuffling that up in a lot of different ways, depending on what makes the most sense for your region. So maybe it's a new cross-sector entity that gets stood up to lead an engine, or maybe it's a university taking the lead, maybe it's a corporation taking the lead. The point here is that we do want to see these multi-sector partnerships, but we don't have any kind of prescription of how the group should come together to form the core team. And I also want to emphasize that we are also not suggesting in this diagram that you should have 4 core partners and 2 additional partners, right? It's just the sort of the diagram here, but this isn't supposed to represent any specific formula for your team development. And then I want to talk a little bit about where we see the NSF Engines program fitting into the larger innovation ecosystem. We've been using the image of a plant as a metaphor here, where NSF's role in supporting foundational research would really be situated sort of at the bottom in the roots of this plant. And if you think about that innovation ecosystem space, the R&D focused economic development aspect of an ecosystem would be sort of the shoots of that tree or plant. And then out more at the tips of the plant, you would have your direct investment, right? Your startups, your VCs, and your accelerators. And we really want to see the NSF Engines program spanning the entire length of this plant and connecting all of those aspects of the ecosystem, right? And we recognize that there are other groups that do this other work really, really well. And we want to build off of that and connect into that with this program. So, for example, the Department of Treasury, private investors, foundries, right? These are some examples of folks that are prevalent in the direct investment space on this plant. SBA, Department of Commerce, Department of Energy are well situated within the R&D focused economic development part of this plant. And we see the engine spanning this entire space. So what's next? Well, today you're here at the Roadshow, and we're hoping to get you started, if you haven't already, on this team formation piece. So you're going to get an opportunity here to meet others in your region who are thinking about the program. And 2 weeks from now, you will be submitting concept outlines. That's on June 30th. Lots of details on the concept outlines in the BAA. And one of the unique things about the concept outlines, if you haven't heard already, is that those that get accepted, we will be publishing so that everyone is aware of who in the region is interested in applying to this program, right? So we're hoping that the takeaway message there is that there is no advantage to keeping your ideas close to the chest, right? You wanna share and reach out to others in your region. And then Proposers Day is on August 1st. You have to have an accepted concept outline to attend that. And type 1s are due at the end of September. The last big event that we have coming up is on June 21st. That's our Q&A session from 1 to 3 Eastern time. So we hope you will attend that. And I just want to end by emphasizing, as we move into the breakout rooms, which we're going to do after this lightning panel, that you really challenge yourself to try to step outside of the perspective of the organization or institution that you represent, and really try to approach the proposals, the projects, this whole entire program through the lens of a region, right? We really want to be thinking about how do we invest dollars into a region, not into an existing entity. Right? So with that, I am going to hand it off to Daniel, who is going to be moderating our ecosystem builder panel. And then I'll be back.
Great. Thank you so much, Becky. Really, really appreciate it. All right. Fantastic. So I am joined by 3 wonderful panelists who are coming in from around the country. If we're able to spotlight them now, that would be fantastic. And Becky, if you could stop sharing your screen as well. Great. So I am with the National Science Foundation. I've been with the team since December. I am working day in and day out on the engines team. And let's spotlight Betsy, fantastic, Danya, and Scott, and we'll get started with the panel discussion. We're doing very kind of informal, where each person will do a quick overview of their background in the ecosystem in which they work, and then we'll do a couple of targeted questions. All right, well, since we have Betsy on screen first, I'm going to get started. Could you give us kind of a 2-minute overview on your background and your role within your ecosystem? That would be great.
Sure. Absolutely. Thanks, Daniel. Hi, everybody. Great to join you today. My name is Betsy Ziegler. I'm the CEO of 1871. 1871 is based in Chicago. And we support digital companies across the full maturity curve. So early stage, growth stage, and big corporate on their innovation strategies. When you think about the ecosystem that we operate within, 1871 covers about 1/3 of all the startup activity in Chicago, but we are partnered broadly. So there's a whole bunch of other organizations in our city and across the surrounding counties and the state that we are partnered with. As I mentioned, we do digital. We're partnered with organizations that are focused on hard tech and manufacturing, organizations that are focused on health sciences, the arts and entertainment, water, right? You name it. Our own growth strategy, particularly coming out of COVID, if we're out, people keep saying we're coming out. I mean, I hope we're coming out of COVID, is we went completely virtual like everybody else in March of 2020. And we now have member organizations and partners, not just in our, specific area, but all across the country and outside of the United States. And so our whole model is to lock arms with other people on the theme that if we are locked arms, all trying to drive a positive impact, we can advance the world forward together.
Great. Let's do Danya next.
Hello, glad to be here. I lead Elemental Accelerator's portfolio. So Elemental is a nonprofit based in Honolulu, and our focus is, well, I guess 2 parts. One is systems-based change. So we do a lot of work around policy, working with corporates, trying to drive innovation, career pathways and internships, and equity and access-oriented programming. And then on the other side, investing in startup success. So we do a lot with climate tech startups to help them scale. So that's a portfolio of over 130 companies. The main differentiator for us is that we fund projects. And so our focus is on first of a kind projects. What could it look like to help a startup scale into a new geography with a new business model, a new customer segment, et cetera. So that is in Hawaii, but also globally. So similarly, we have partnerships all over the world to help companies scale in the regions that make the most sense to them. But our core focus is in Hawaii and California. So I'll speak mostly to the kind of Hawaii ecosystem here today and say that there's quite a robust ecosystem in Hawaii focused on innovation. We are one of the latest stage programs, so really focused on growth stage companies and helping them scale commercially, but there are quite a few of those earlier stage accelerators and incubators that support startups. There's also ones that are targeted around specific sectors, and then there's the kind of investor community, government, and quite a few different kind of spaces and hubs to support entrepreneurship. I would say it's one quick little bit of history on how the ecosystem was formed here, particularly focused on climate, is that we were originally founded out of a policy initiative that the state of Hawaii put in place to help drive the new renewable energy transition. And so with that, there was a set of targets and goals and some funding associated to really help bring innovation to Hawaii and support entrepreneurs in Hawaii. And that's what initially was the impetus for starting the organization I work for now and really building the ecosystem here focused on climate. So I'm happy to share more about that, but that's just a quick overview.
Yeah, thank you so much. Scott, do you want to wrap things up?
Hey everyone, thanks Daniel. Really do appreciate being here. I'm a huge fan of this program. I think it's incredible. My name's Scott Andes. I work at the Economic Development Administration and I lead the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, which is, as some of you may be aware, the $1 billion economic development challenge focused on economic clusters. And ecosystems is really critical. Probably one of the most critical pieces of everything that we work on and think about and work with our 60 finalists and just in general value in this competition. And just a couple of observations, at least in our competition, as we sort of sprinted through this this process on ecosystems. A couple things that we've noticed in terms of positive things. I think one of the things is like it's important to front load the hard work. So building that ecosystem is difficult, and it's also easy to just sort of punt on some of the hard decisions, on sort of non-traditional partners that.
You're on mute, Scott.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. Am I still on mute?
No, you're good.
Okay,
non-traditional partners.
Great. So all the different things that you just sort of punt till later. Front load the hard work. That's a critical piece of it. It'll make the rest of the process so much easier. The second thing I'll say is that without even knowing it, building these ecosystems, it's easy to make some of the equity goals and other non-traditional partners and even just community engagement turn into a performative exercise instead of genuinely seeking new information and recognizing like you should all get to a place where you feel comfortable knowing what you don't know. I think that's like a critical element of building the ecosystem. And I think it's also like super okay, particularly for some of the academic partners, to recognize that like this is new, right? I think the assumption is that like you've got to kind of walk into a lot of rooms knowing the answers to things, but like what they're building at NSF and what we've built with Build Back Better, Regional Challenge, like these are new for a lot of you, for what you're traditionally used to partnering, and that's okay. Like I think you'll find building that ecosystem, genuine partnerships is easier when you just sort of like lead with that. And then the only other thing I'll sort of talk about is like, building these long-term relationships takes a lot of time. So, get started early and just keep moving. Like don't get bogged down, really just keep moving forward as you sort of begin to develop these relationships. And then a final piece I'll add, just as sort of an observation from our program, is that like the largest institutions don't always mean that they're the best quarterbacks. Sometimes the largest institutions should be playing other really important roles, and that's a-okay. But I think often the assumption is, we're big, we're used to working with NSF, and therefore we're the ideal quarterback. I would question that hypothesis and be open to alternative models that fit your societal and community goals. Or maybe you are meant to be the quarterback, but I think it's just like people often defer to the largest, most well-equipped institutions to lead things. And I think it's the responsibility of those institutions to ask who, where, and when they ought to be the leaders, and where and when others should be sort of taking charge of particular aspects of this. So happy to unpack any of that from the experience of our program. But like I said, I'm like over the moon to see this project and what NSF is doing here. And so if I can, or EDA can ever be of any support, we are here to help.
Great. Well, that's fantastic. I want to build on something that Scott said and turn it over to Betsy and Danya. I mean, one thing that we see a lot is how do you build authentic partnerships where all parties involved are actually benefiting, as opposed to it being a partnership where one party is spending and the other is gaining, or things like that. Not the types of partnerships that you can kind of just plaster on your website or can put on an application, but how do you build really meaningful partnerships? You can talk about it from your lenses, helping to lead incubators, accelerators, and even working in academia before that. So I'll go to Betsy first, and I'll take the same question to you, Danya. You're on mute, Betsy.
Like 1 million Zoom calls later, I still do that. Scott, I wrote down the word performative when you spoke, because I think that's many things are we are invested in innovation because we visited an incubator and, we've checked the box, right? That this is, in order to drive real change, you can't be performative. So we've done a lot of trial and error. We are connected to, Chicago has 77 neighborhoods. So I'll give you this as an example. We are connected to 27 of them right now with a goal over time for 1871 to be supportive of all 77. And we position ourselves as the and. 1871 wants to be the and to the organizations that are also supporting entrepreneurs building in those neighborhoods. We want people to build where they live. But we walk in as the big behemoth, and these small organizations, rightfully so, are distrustful. So we had to spend a lot of time, literally like 2 years, spending time in their organizations, building relationships, inviting them to our events, showing up. They don't physically have to be part of, show up at 1871 to be part of anything. They can do everything remote. But we had to invest ahead of any proposal that went ahead of it. And I don't mean invest money, because we're a nonprofit as well, but invest time, energy, commitment, clear intentions, really understanding what job they had to do, what pain points they have in delivering on that job. How might 1871 help them address those pain points, right? That's our value proposition to them. And we're finally starting to get some real momentum there because, we're doing the hard things. Again, that's a repeat of some of the language that Scott used, but, and now it's a little bit rinse and repeat, meaning we understand that approach takes time, energy, detail orientation, but now that we've got it, we can repeat it for the next one, repeat it for the next one. And to some extent, the time gets truncated as we do more and more, because then you're building a reputation of, no, these people are legit. We got real impact, right? That, this is a net good thing for your members if you're partnered together.
Great. Danya.
Yeah, thank you for that. I absolutely agree on the building trust side of things. And in Hawaii, a lot of that looks like getting your hands dirty together, like hands in the soil, beating together, spending time, eating together, just like really thinking about kind of in a hopefully post-COVID world, how to do that more effectively, to build those relationships so that they withstand challenge and any conflict. I'll say also, we have built out some resources, and happy to share this through the NSF through the team, but a few different things up front I think help quite a bit. So like signing a kind of commitment letter or something that you guys that both partners are committed to in terms of the intentions for the work together. What are the ideal outcomes? What are the plan to share learnings with each other? What's the like cadence of communication? How frequently, and who will what are the roles and responsibilities of each person within the partnership? And that sometimes can feel a little awkward or formal up front, but setting those expectations early when you really are going into a formal partnership make a huge amount of difference. And I'd say doing that up front is important, but also checking in throughout, what we call taking equity pauses, but just pausing to check in and see how's it going. Are we the commitments we kept up front, are we maintaining those, and give people just space to share if things aren't working.
Yeah, thank you. And I like that phrase, equity pauses. I thought that was makes a lot of sense. And what you were talking about there is, I think, similar to what we talk about in our proposals around governance structures and building robust governance structures from the start. So I'm going to hop it back over to Scott here. So a lot of applicants, both for our program and others, sometimes think I'll just throw a lot of things up a wall and see what sticks. And hopefully someone else will make those really tough decisions for me. What advice would you provide to regions that are kind of thinking through an institutional mindset as opposed to more of a regional mindset about how to reset and how to approach something like this? Because, it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of coalition building in these early days. So I'm sure this is a challenge you ran into with your competition. Perhaps there's something we can learn as we go through this process now.
Totally. I mean, I think one way I would phrase it is keep it simple, and simple doesn't mean easy, but simple means making choices, right? I think one of the number one things we saw in at least our phase one, and now that we're deep into phase two, is that like some coalitions are able to make clear choices, place some bets, and all rally around a North Star, and others can't. And like that's probably the biggest difference between what we consider to be successful and good investments and those that are maybe less competitive, is simply the ability for you all to a robust, clear coalition that is saying the same thing, and and by making a bet, it means you're doing things and you're explicitly choosing not to do other things, which is really, really hard in a coalition approach when sometimes things can unravel to the lowest common denominator. But like, do not expect your federal reviewers or others to be making those choices for you. Like the sort of theory of change of this type of work, both in my program and I would assume our NSF colleagues would agree, is that like, leadership comes bottom up, right? That we want you to make those hard decisions. We really want to see coalitions that have come together and made tough choices. One thing that I'll just add as well, that sort of we observed from our conversation, and that I think I would recommend people on this call think about, is like, these are really, and I would defer to Daniel and others if they agree on this, but at least first, like, these are new programs for our respective organizations and entities. And that means like, some of the old rules of the road and some of the old ways of doing business with our respective bureaus and agencies might not be applicable. And so what we saw in our competition is a lot of people who are used to working with EDA and others and other program settings coming in and say, oh, it's going to be like this, or it's going to be like this. And like, we can read the tea leaves, and you should listen to us community partners because we know and like, that's not a super strong strategy for really new programs. Because what I would recommend is listen to the NSF team, listen to what they're telling you about the direction and sort of the spirit of this competition, instead of saying, we've had 35 NSF grants over the last 20 years, community partners, you should listen to us. We really, really know how to win this thing, right? So I think take these programs for what they are, which is new, and like bring a little modesty and flexibility to your application. And I think that, you'll be, equipped to address this really amazing opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I'll definitely echo that this is a new approach, and we are taking a very different approach to how we do things, perhaps from what other programs at NSF have done, even other programs within the Technology Innovation and Partnerships Directorate. So I'll echo that point. Danya, quick question for you. A lot of people say incubators, accelerators should only do one thing and do it really well. Workforce development, community wealth building, policy, those are outside scope. You all have taken a very different approach. You've been successful in doing that. Can you talk to us about how you can do a number of things at once and do them well, rather than kind of sacrificing the quality of your work by working in multiple spaces?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one, we do have partnerships to help us do all these things well. So I would say it's not us on our own trying to tackle policy and shifting the corporate landscape and bringing people into climate tech. There's a huge focus for our organization in partnering deeply. So I'll say that up front, and then I'll say also we just found we couldn't do it otherwise. And we're working with startups initially. We've been around for a decade. Initially, the plan was we'll just provide funding. We'll provide funding to local organizations in Hawaii that can help address this clean energy transition. And that it didn't work. It wasn't enough. We needed to provide services and support. And they needed a peer network, a group of folks that they could actually engage with and learn from. And you couldn't just focus on renewable energy because water touches renewable energy, obviously. Food and agriculture, there's so much energy. Without taking a systems-based approach and without providing the breadth of services to the startups we work with, we just weren't effectively meeting the challenge. And then as we were working, we realized you can only scale so far in a place if there's policy barriers that get in your way. And we were seeing that time and time again with our startups, that there was just really outdated and challenging policy barriers So we needed to play in that space. We needed to, in our unique way, in the way that we could, which was essentially to bring startups to the table, to get them in front of policymakers to say, this is actually impeding my success and in scaling the impact that we all want to see happen. So being able to provide those resources and stories and data to policymakers, not necessarily being the ones who are doing everything. We work with partners to do that, but acknowledging that you can't really, or at least we felt we couldn't really just target one specific sector or one specific kind of method to create change. That being said, we're just really clear on what it is we're really good at, and how we can, what we can bring to the table, and then where we need help, and communicating that to our ecosystem as well. So we know, okay, you guys are actually going to write the legislation, for example, and we're going to work with this lobbying group, but here's the role we can play.
Great. The last question is going to go to Betsy. Betsy, you have been in academic settings. You are now running an entity that is doing a lot of the work that some of it might be done within academia, but done very differently in the realm that you're doing that work in 1871. What are some things that you think can be done very well in academia, and others that perhaps are done better by outside groups like your own, kind of having the perspective of having worked within academia and outside of it? What are some things you're able to do now in your role that perhaps wouldn't have been possible working within a single academic institution? And I'm going to warn you now that you're on mute.
Twice in 12 minutes. I think both are necessary. Like the best case scenario for a student is that they have access to something that happens in their own campus, and they have access to an organization like an 1871, or, you know, name the organization in other regions to the extent that that's possible. So like we're partnered with a whole bunch of universities, and back to my earlier point, we serve as the and. I think that the thing that we can, when you're outside of an academic institution, you should be able to move faster than what can happen inside of an institution, right? We can control our strategy. We can control where we put our time and energy and focus, but often, at least in my experience working in the university context, you know, that gets set well ahead of time, and you're sort of marching to that plan, regardless of, you know, other changes in the external environment that might suggest a different answer. I think importantly, we're not trying, when we do partner with universities, our job is not to replace the role of a faculty member, is not to replace the role of a 4-credit class. It's to create the condition for that student entrepreneur, that student innovator, to now be part of a community that's much broader and much more diverse than the one that they experience just in their own university context. So I worked at Northwestern, got students that work at Northwestern, they're together at Northwestern. And then when they're with 1871, they're with students from all across Illinois and the broader Midwest region, not just university students, but entrepreneurs. And that completely changes their orientation in terms of who they can get help from, how they're building their business, right? It makes each business stronger by having that broader diversity. I wish, I mean, the big, and I'm sorry, Daniel, I'm about to say something else. I think the big nut to crack that I don't think any university has done perfect at, some are better than others, is how do you take, right? You guys know, being part of the government, you're the #1 startup incubator in the world by big margin, right? A lot of the ideas start in the government and they get tested there, but universities have so much opportunity to surround the faculty members' research with commercialization teams. And like I said, some schools do that better than others. But I think that there's just so much innovation that's locked inside there that I'd, love to figure out how to get the key to open that up and spread it around the whole. I mean, that's a global thing. That's a global.
Well, I mean, that's one of the goals of this program, is to figure out how we can unlock potential innovation in places where it's not currently being unlocked, rather, if that's geographies and types of institutions. So we're really excited about it. And we're even more excited for you all to continue the conversation with different teams in their breakout rooms. So I'm going to turn it back over to Becky now. We'll give some instructions on the breakout rooms, but then Scott, Betsy, and Danya will be joining you in the breakout room so you can ask them additional questions. They can weigh in on the conversation. So with that, let's turn it back over to Becky.
All right, thanks, Daniel. And thank you to the panelists for the discussion. That was fantastic. All right, so we are moving on to the exciting part, which is the breakout rooms, where you all can start actually interacting with each other. So just a few things to point out before we jump to breakout rooms. The goal here is for you all to start conversations with each other and to start thinking about the strengths and assets of your region and where there's potential for growth. And also thinking about inclusivity, who the various players are that you want to have in the rooms. Please don't jump to the breakout rooms just yet. I know that they just popped up, but that's for our facilitators so that they can be there waiting for you. So who's not in the room? You want to be thinking about who's not in your breakout room that you want to get involved in the conversation. What this is not is a pitch session to us about your ideas. We really don't want this to be a competitive environment. And hopefully this will not be the last time you see each other. So the breakout rooms are organized by state. We are not suggesting that your regions have to be states, but we just thought this was the easiest way to get people who are geographically local to each other in a breakout room. You are free to move from room to room if you are interested. Your region may span 2 states. Feel free to jump in and out of both of those breakout rooms. We should have facilitators in each of the rooms. And in terms of thinking about your region of service, like I just mentioned, right? That's an open question for you to determine. It can be a single metropolitan area, all the way up to multiple adjacent states, if that's what makes sense for you. And hopefully one of the things that came across in the panel is the importance of partnerships, thinking about our end users. And the other thing about these engines projects is that we want to see them rooted in regional interests. So how are they going to drive local regional economy and grow potential talent? We'll have a host of framing questions to drive the discussion today, but it really is going to be around regional assets and partnerships. And then just before we jump into our breakout rooms, in case you don't have these dates burned into your brain already, concept outlines due on June 30th, the letter of intent, August 31st, the full proposal, sorry, I should be more specific. The letter of intent for type 1s is due on August 31st, full proposals on September 29th. And for type 2s, the deadlines for the letter of intent and full proposals will be announced at a future date. So with that, I want to encourage everyone to move into the breakout rooms, pay attention to when the panelists jump into your room, and feel free to engage them in the discussion as well. And I'll see some of you in a room momentarily. Thanks again.